I'll never forget the day we decided to cancel the carnival. I cried.
Are you ready? All right, let's go.
Manufacturing is sexy. Sounds crazy? Just wait. I'm Z Holly, host of The Art of Manufacturing. Your behind-the-scenes look at how people who make stuff are trying to make it in their industries. If you've ever wondered how to build a brand, a business, or just a better mousetrap, tune in and enjoy. This week, we're talking with a couple of clowns. No, really. Brent Bushnell and Eric Gradman are trained clowns, and they're rethinking the future of entertainment. What does a circus have to do with manufacturing? Well, the founders of Two Bit Circus are planning to build micro-amusement parks around the world. And to do so, they're learning how to go from prototype to production on their unique games. I was excited to catch up with them because they're about to open their first park in downtown LA this summer. And I was curious what kind of new games and experiences they had in store. And in the process, we learned about their process of developing their crazy ideas. Brent and Eric bring unique backgrounds to the company. And in fact, Brent is the son of Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese. What was it like to grow up in that family? We hear about that and a whole lot more on this week's episode of The Art of Manufacturing. What does it mean to be a trained circus clown?
Eric, why don't you take that?
Sure. Well, in my case, it comes from several years actually touring with not one, but two different circuses. Going from town to town, being on stage, dangling from truss and grids and spinning fire high above the crowd, wearing clown white, a lot of clown white. Oh my God, it is hard to remove clown white. Yeah, I was a circus performer for many years.
But what does it mean? Like, what do you need to do? What do you need to know how to do?
Well, for me, I was never a public performer, but went to actual clown school, which exists. You can go to clown school, and it's like a blend of theater and improv, and you are embracing the ridiculous. But the thing that I love the most about it is how much it, frankly, overlaps with Buddhism.
What?
It is a really in
mind blown.
Yeah. Well, they often tell you to have a soft mind, right? And the idea is the clown is looking at the world through new eyes, right? And being able to reflect back on humanity, all the weird things that we do that we maybe just take for granted. And
you don't mean soft boiled mind, do you?
But and in Buddhism, there's a concept called shibumi, which is a beginner's mind, right? Same kind of thing.
Awesome.
I'll tell you one thing about being a clown is even when you're not on stage all the time, you're still a clown.
Oh yeah,
You
Once
just
a
live
clown,
your life that way.
always a clown. Yeah.
Tell me about Two Bit Circus.
Man, Eric and I are both, in addition to being trained clowns, we're both engineers first maybe. And in 2008, we were pretty frustrated with what we were doing. God, I can't believe that's
10
decade
years ago.
And we just wanted to bring people together in public in fun new ways. And it was a special time for tech, computer vision, cheap sensors, the kind of stuff that made your iPhone possible. And so we started collaborating, making interactive art and interactive games. And it was stuff that we wanted, that was simple, stuff that people could walk up to and, interact with at a party for fun. And we were taking that stuff around and people liked it and brands started calling. And so our stuff got bigger and the parties got bigger. And all of a sudden we were doing all the entertainment for Amazon's holiday party and huge conferences for Intel. And, we started being able to entertain 5,000 people a day.
What would that look like?
A high-tech circus. Well, so, rooms of laser beams, walls of buttons, rock band for space battle. So many, we were building escape rooms years before escape rooms. We built a whole version of Pokemon Go before Pokemon Go, a GPS-enabled smartphone game.
I remember that.
Oh my
that
God.
was so many years.
So
I remember you around USC. You were like testing it out. And all that.
Yeah, well,
running around looking for flowers. Yeah.
All of this was us playing with entertainment in public, right? How can we use modern technology to get people out of the house, away from work, away from home, playing in fun new ways? And the technology is almost a head fake, but an enabler of that entertainment.
For me at that time, it was about misusing all the technology that was coming on the scene. Yeah. Cell phones were new. There was a time when cell phones were new. Yeah. And they had crazy sensors in them. They had cameras. They had accelerometers. And they never intended, the manufacturers of those cell phones, they never intended for that data to leave the confines of those cell phones. But what we were doing is we were taking that data and we were using it to create art and games and crazy stuff like that. Another thing that was new was 3D printers and Arduinos. Oh my goodness, the ability to spin up prototypes really fast using all these new tools we could do stuff that no one had ever seen before. It was great.
Amazing. So what are you doing? What's the big vision now? Because you've completely changed the direction of Two Bit Circus.
Well, interestingly, the fundamental tenet of bringing people together in public using new technology is still the same, and the venues are getting really big now. So, after doing a lot of traveling events, both, pop-up stuff for the Super Bowl and the Olympics, we did our own traveling carnival, a big STEAM carnival that was one half all of our high-tech entertainment and one half a bunch of hands-on projects to inspire kids about science and engineering. We're finally going permanent. We're opening what we call a micro-amusement park in the middle of downtown LA. It is literally, about 3 blocks from where we're sitting right now. It's in the middle of the Arts District, 50,000 square feet. So, about the size of a football field. It's half a city block. It's got a huge parking lot. It's got, a massive building filled with our version of escape rooms, full food and beverage, a whole reimagined arcade, a carnival midway, a virtual reality arena. I mean, the thing is freaking bananas.
I just want to point out that in the decade that Brent and I have been working together, of all the ideas that we've been way too soon for, the original idea that we were way too soon for was this kind of entertainment out in public. The first thing we collaborated on, the first project that we spun up a startup around was to create this. Yeah. We were way too soon. Yeah. We wanted to put this in malls. We wanted to have social entertainment, high-tech social entertainment, and we thought it would go everywhere. Yeah. And we were so early, but guess what? It came full circle.
And it was so funny because, in 2010, I went down Sand Hill Road to try to raise money for this concept. So and walk into some of the biggest VCs that you would recognize, and they didn't quite laugh me out of the room, but basically did. They were like, we invest in Google. Maybe you've heard of it, and they're like, you want to do what? Immersive entertainment? It's like a physical thing, Nobody had any idea. And the part that was maybe the best was, we were closing, our last investment round, millions of dollars. And one of those VCs called back and was like, oh my God, all that stuff you guys said came true. We're looking at this space now. And I was like, wow, thanks for being late. I wish you could have called 10 days ago.
Yeah. So, my first startup was a home shopping thing about 30 years ago. So that was way too early. It's not flattery to say you were ahead of your time.
The pioneers and the arrows.
It's
and
not
all that.
good.
Well, I got to say, I think back to you doing TEDx USC. Yeah. That was freaking incredible. And that was one of those early venues. We showcased the stuff, right?
Absolutely.
We were taking our party, our
things. Was that the first one?
That was the very first one.
That was the very first one.
Yeah.
And you had that 5-person game, and you had
What game was that?
I wonder what game it
was.
I'm
trying to remember what game it was. Yeah.
We had 5 people playing at this, or 6 people
the
playing?
Party table, maybe? The Hexacade?
Hexacade, 6.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Good.
I forgot the 6th one.
Well, we have
That's
some
still in rotation.
Too, so,
that continues to entertain people.
My favorite one, though, was the one where you were kicking that mannequin. I was getting my
Punch Bob. So that was
Punch
Dick
Bob.
Whitney. Richard Whitney made that. Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
That thing. Yeah.
What's the philosophy, though, behind Two Bit Circus? It's not just about immersive entertainment, but there's a lot of stuff going on.
So we're trying to get people elbow to play. This is really important. Brent and I are smashing elbows right now. The reason this is important is because, there are a lot of competitive entertainment. There's a lot of competitive entertainment out there. We're trying to get people standing next to each other, playing together in public.
Mm-hmm. And you see everybody on their social networks, on their phones, the opportunity to be in public, socializing in real life again. We really want to get people back in, in public. And I would say also from a mission standpoint, we're as nerds, we love being nerds, and we want to inspire other kids to be nerds. And so we have an entire parallel nonprofit at the Two Bit Circus Foundation that is deploying STEAM learning out into schools. We're in about half the schools of LA. We've expanded it internationally. It's really growing gangbusters. So, we make games. We love to share those with the public, and then we love to share our process with students so they can do the same thing.
What did your investors think about the STEAM Carnival and the whole nonprofit side of it?
Yeah. I love our investors. They're such great humans. And they, in the beginning, were investing in us. And they liked the carnival. They were investing in the mission of public entertainment, high tech, getting people together socially. Steam Carnival was an approach to do that. As we started to see the complexities of traveling an event of that size, it was 120,000 square feet. So freaking massive. Think about moving that stuff around and setting it up for a weekend. It was so much work. And so they were really, in the very beginning, investing in us and that approach. And the as we started to evolve and see and realize, gosh, people love this, but this is not the right format. And we evolved into the permanent facility. They were very excited about the fact that the carnival wasn't going to die and was going to live on as a nonprofit.
Really?
And oh yeah, because they are.
We got one next weekend, right?
We've got one next weekend. We got another later in May. We're doing Compton and Hawthorne. The foundation's supported by Boeing and then the American Honda Foundation. It's incredible, and they are impact oriented. They, all of our investors are excited about the fact that this thing has continued, and so it's I'm thrilled.
Given that you're an entrepreneur, though, that's one of the biggest pieces of advice everyone says is focus. I mean, Clearly you're just so busy.
Yeah.
How can you justify spending your time on something obviously it's admirable that you're doing it. What's really driving you to do that?
Oh, but wait, we get to just show up to the Steam Carnival next weekend. We don't actually have to build much for it at all. Anything.
So there is a team running the foundation. I mean, we have a dedicated team that's doing it. It has sponsors and grants. It has actual customers. And so it is a part of our philanthropy, but there's a dedicated crew operating it. Now, the focus thing, absolutely, you have to focus on what you're doing. And as we engaged and started to realize, gosh, this is not really a business. It is it's clearly exciting. We sold out 5,000 people a day, incredible sponsors across tons of different brands. And, that meant that it had to live on in some capacity. But I'll never forget the day we decided to cancel the carnival. I cried. I mean, I had sold this thing for a year and a half, and it was crushing to make that decision, but it was the right decision for the company in retrospect. And the fact that it could live on somewhere else was really powerful.
So what you're doing is you're putting it into a foundation, which is a separate organization.
It is a completely separate entity. As a for-profit, Two Bit Circus is a Delaware C Corp, and there is a parallel 501c3 that is a completely different organization that is running the carnival.
So this is not exactly what people think when they think of manufacturing, certainly making. But tell me about it. If we think about manufacturing as being taking something and then replicating it physically, making it, does this fit into that category?
Definitely. So one thing that's happened in the transition from being a prototyping company that brings things to carnivals, transforming into a company that's building permanent locations with an intention to scale those locations to many locations. We've had to figure out how to do this properly, how to manufacture things, how to take our build process, make it possible for us to not only replicate it, but also send it out to third parties so we can scale this entire system. The transformation that's happened in this company over the last year is unbelievable. It means that, things now take 150% as long as they used to, which is very frustrating.
Sounds great.
No, only 150%. Yeah. And that's the cool part, right? Being a prototyper personally and being sort of an inveterate prototyper my entire life, I always worried that the difference between prototyping and manufacturing was going to be it was going to be tremendous. But that hasn't been the case. And by bringing on lots of people and instituting processes that allow people to share designs and document things and sort of rapidly manufacture, we haven't slowed down. We're still building lots of cool stuff.
So describe something that you're building right now that you're excited about.
There's a lot of different platforms inside of the park, but one of them is a motion platform with joysticks that is a solution for different kinds of VR. So it is a motion platform that we bought, joysticks that we bought, and then we ripped off the arms from that motion platform. We installed our own infrastructure to be able to have those joysticks, and then we've worked with third-party game companies to adapt their content for public. And it's interesting because a lot of great VR titles are 10 hours of play, right? They're long, protracted games or experiences. And in public, we need 5 or 10 minutes. You're going to sit down, you're going to play for a little bit. So to go from 10 hours to 5 minutes is easy, much easier than to go from 5 minutes to 10 hours, right? And so what they'll do is they're going to modify the content to take out some menus, make it a little simpler, and run it on top of our platform. And so we are a showcase for other people's creations. We've taken our making skills in order to be able to define this platform and then worked with third parties to bring that to market.
What would be an example of a game that you're doing that with?
we have an incredible space adventure. You take off and you go into outer space, and then all of a sudden something happens and you have to figure out what to do. And maybe I'll stop there. It's not spoil the surprise.
One thing I'm really excited about, we call skidoos, and there are our own custom arcade cabinets, but they're unlike any arcade cabinet you've ever seen. They're long. There are so many pixels on these things. 21 by 9 screens, 3 of them stacked end to end. It's like a combination of skee-ball and Pac-Man. And we custom build these, right? We started with a sketch, we turned it into a prototype, and we put it through the entire design for manufacturing process. And now we're churning these out with the help of a third-party manufacturer that's operating on our designs, using milled pieces, some of which come out of our shop, some of which come out of their shop. It's been really exciting to see how we can make a really polished, finished product in a way that I know we can just keep making them.
And, the process to get to that final unit, that Skidoo unit, was very maker in nature. We, as rapid prototypers, Eric and I talked about a concept in the morning. Literally, Eric had a working version in the afternoon.
Well, Eric is amazing.
Right? Eric is freaking incredible. It was only by having that prototype and then being able to test it on the public over the next couple of weeks and starting to see, wow, that should really be a trackball, not a joystick. And, that back monitor is really hard to see if you're under 4 feet tall, right? A little Johnny's not going to be able to see this. So we started to make another version. We canted the monitors up. We replaced the trackball, right? We started to make the modifications that you only would know once it actually existed. And this is the part that the entire maker community, the entire creative community can implement now, is because that cycle time can be so fast. You can build and iterate and then go back to the drawing board and build and iterate again. You can really you can zero in on the right solution. Damien from OK Go has this incredible talk on their creative process, and he describes finding the solution, right? You set out in a problem space without really knowing even the question you're trying to answer. You just sort of have a general domain that you're exploring, and then the question and the answer find you. And I think about even the way 2-Bit Circus has evolved. Eric and I knew we wanted to play with new tech and we wanted to do it in public, and we didn't have enough of a business model that we could go raise money. We didn't know enough about the domain. And so what do? We did a bunch of corporate consulting. We started to learn about the space and figure out the problems. And it was only then that we started to realize, where are things broken? Where could we add real value? And then the answer was clear, but it wasn't until we sort of were in there mussing around and screwing it up that we started to figure out what was the right move.
Yeah, I'll say to wind up with good final products, you have to prototype. But I think a lot of people forget the most important part of prototyping, which is throwing away the bad ones. We throw away a lot of bad ones.
Eric throws too many stuff away.
I love throwing stuff away. Last year, in preparation for establishing the final list of things that would go into this first park, we built a lot of stuff. And only by building a lot of stuff were we able to filter that list down to a couple of things that we think are absolutely fantastic. So,
which one was the biggest disappointment that it didn't work?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. I've thrown away so many things in the last year. A bunch of different computer vision projects that I had worked on.
Because computer vision doesn't work as well as
No. There are other computer vision projects that made it in. I don't think it's the computer vision that disqualified these projects. I think computer vision projects in particular take a little bit longer to get right because complex sensing, it needs to feel right, or it's hard to make that point to people. If you put a game like this,
what was your vision? And
all right, so let me give you an example. There is an old game called Gruyere, also called Cheese Wall. I don't know what it is. Anyway, you got these two ropes, and you've got a ring, and you're manipulating these two ropes to move the ring up the wall. But on this wall, there are holes. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to use this ring to pull a ball up the wall and avoid the holes. If you don't avoid a hole, the ball falls through the hole and you lose. So I said, okay, we can make this even more awesome. I'm going to aim a camera at this thing. I'm going to turn the ring into a fiducial so a camera can sense it. And we're going to projection map this entire surface. And it was super cool. It was high tech. It was fun to play. There were beautiful graphics. And it was just a little bit too hard to make the point. And so we rejected it. It's going to come back, though. It's going to come back one of these days. I was really excited about that one.
I was sad to see. We spent a lot of time doing cameras mounted on RC cars that you could drive around so that you could literally be, from the perspective of an RC car, in a racetrack. And that one, while fun, needs a lot of space. It was, at first we tried it in VR, which was basically the nausea-inducing machine. And then when we did it, even with just a display, it's still, when you think about stuff in public, just assume every single thing you put in the hands of the public will break. And, this
in
was
unexpected ways.
Oh my God. So it was very, this one was not going to fit. So.
Something that I only came to appreciate in the last couple years is the value of good quantitative data, even on prototypes. And I feel like before that, we would do qualitative tests of everything. We'd build stuff, we'd put it in front of people and watch them play and go, oh yeah, it looks like they're having a good time. Or nah, it doesn't look like they're having a good time. And that worked to some degree. I mean, I'll throw away something if no one has fun playing it. But to be able to capture data about every game that we're building, about every project that we're building, record play times, record when people walk away, things like that, to really get down and dirty and capture those details and analyze those details has been incredibly valuable, especially in the last year, for figuring out what stuff is really working and what stuff are we just fooling ourselves into thinking it's working.
Do you have any favorite tools you use for that kind of analysis?
Very recently, we've started logging every event that happens in every game to files and collecting it with standard tools of IT infrastructure. I'm using Kibana and Elasticsearch, things that are designed for the web world. No joke. We're using them for games. Prometheus is another example of a tool that I'm using. And these things seem totally inapplicable. And we get such good data. We get such good data out of these tools. That's probably why they're in use in the web world.
Yeah.
And and I would say qualitative is as important to us. And so operationally, we run a beta night every month. And beta night is a time when we invite the public, and it's a dedicated group that has raised their hand and said they want to be a part of beta night. They know that they're coming for stuff that's rugged and broken and and has all sorts of issues, but they want to be involved in the process. They want to be able to give feedback. They want to be there as part of the solution. And so we have the engineer who made the thing is there, the one showcasing it, and we also invite other friends of ours who are other creators to be able to come and showcase their stuff. And so in a big party, we've got a bunch of our new stuff, a bunch of other people's stuff, and then everybody gets to play. And the qualitative of seeing what people love and what they don't like and the things that are have a lot of staff overhead, you don't really know that until you're actually doing it in real life for real people. You can imagine that all day long, but once you're doing it, you learn a lot.
Are there things that make it more possible now? What's different about now that enables you to do this serious tinkering?
Oh, the tools. Yeah. The tools are incredible. One thing that happened a couple years ago is that we got a CNC router table, a 4 foot by 8 foot CNC router table. We stuck it in a shipping container out in our backyard, and it gave us the ability to throw together cabinetry really, really quickly. Whereas before we would have had a computer velcroed to a lighting stand with a monitor. Like, it was a mess what we did before. And now we could enclose all this stuff and we could pick it up and we can take it from place to place, right? Having a tool like that at our disposal meant that everything we built was just a little bit more professional, a little bit more inviting. Now, look, people were still getting splinters when they played this stuff. Like, we're upfront about that. But just
have everyone sign a waiver.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
I think anything where you need a helmet or have to sign a waiver is definitely
gonna be fun, right? But the design tools that enabled us to really quickly knock out designs and to do what Brent says that I do all the time, which is start with a sketch in the morning and have a physical working version by the evening. Right. It's all about the tools at our disposal.
And, imagine the ability for a script in Python to stitch together web APIs, your microcontroller and your Unity build. And all of a sudden you're able to have this internet connected, Twitter enabled 3D game that's controlled by monster trackballs. Again, in a weekend, and cross-compiling before Arduino was a total freaking nightmare, right? Arduino makes that completely simple, open source, and there's a million.
Explain to everyone what cross-compiling is. Not everyone is tech.
Yes, yeah. So if you were going to put code on a microcontroller before an Arduino, you needed to have that environment running on your computer and try to get that onto that microcontroller and use the proprietary tools by whatever microchip company's making this. It's a freaking such a finicky process, and Arduino made that completely simple.
Damn it. Every once in a while, I'm reminded of the fact that Brent can still do what I do, but I can't do what Brent does.
You're the best engineer I've ever met.
So what do you think are the biggest trends that are changing your industry that you're the most excited about?
Oh, Eric, what's our industry?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I kind of stopped.
Well, let me opine on that for a second.
In circuses. No.
The circus industry.
Well, you know what's interesting is, as sad as it was that Barnum & Bailey, shut down, they announced their closure the exact week we announced our fundraise. I mean, it was wild. It was like they were passing the baton to us. But, before television and radio, circus was literally the biggest form of entertainment on the planet. And, it's always been an incredible showcase of human capacity and ability, and we're very excited to bring it back.
Well, it's interesting. You're talking about the showcase of human ability, and now you're putting that back in the hands of the people who go. That's very different.
Yeah. Well, we're very strong believers that the future is interactive. So much content, so much of entertainment has been a passive thing. For the most part, even going to an amusement park is a passive thing. You're sitting and being, entertained upon. But, the trend of escape rooms and immersive theater and, virtual reality, augmented reality, all of that, you are an active participant. And if you're not part of the creation, you are co-creating that environment. If you are not actively engaged in your immersive experience, immersive theater experience, you're going to have a terrible time. But if you wander around and explore and are curious, you're going to have it pays dividends.
This place that we're building, Two Bit Circus, its story is still being written. And it's going to be written up until the day we open the doors, and then it's going to still be written for years after that. And so we have this amazing opportunity to see how that story evolves by watching what people do when they visit. Brent and I are absolutely obsessed with immersive theater, right? Mm-hmm. So for those of you who don't know, like immersive theater is you show up and you think you're going to a normal theater show, and all of a sudden you realize that the performer, there may be performers sitting right next to you. Oh, and there's no seats, and all of a sudden you're walking around and you're backstage. Like everything you've come to expect about theater can be thrown away. Yeah. In immersive theater.
I've done immersive theater that was in limousines overlaid on downtown LA.
Yes,
I've done immersive. Yuval Sharon is incredible.
Opera.
Did one in a running restaurant where I was an audience of one with two actors
at a table.
I did that one too.
Speakeasy Society is incredible. They are so prolific and wonderful.
Oh my God! Can I tell you a story about that one though? So I have no idea what this is. All I know is it's going to be a theater for one, and it was pretty interesting. And I get completely sucked in, but you don't really know when it begins and when it ends, right? And so. Finally, I'm sitting there by myself. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going home. I start walking out. And the weird thing was, I don't know if you know Phil Glau. But anyway, he was there. He's taking pictures of a wedding. It was going to be a surprise wedding.
Who was going to be surprised?
The friends. So the friends didn't know that they were going to a wedding. It was just at this restaurant. And it just so happened that this was happening.
Oh my God.
So that was kind of weird. And then I'm walking out. And it all started where you have to go up to some guy with a cactus or something, right?
Cactus at the bar.
So I'm leaving. I'm about to leave. And then this guy comes up to me from the restaurant. He's like, okay, they're ready for you. And I'm like, oh, I guess this is part of the thing too. I'm like, okay. So I start walking back. And I said, so what am I supposed to do? And he's like, well, you're officiating the wedding. They thought I was the officiant.
Oh my God! And you're like, is this still a theater project?
Part of the theater? I almost officiated this wedding.
Oh my God,
that's awesome. And I'd like to imagine that everybody in that restaurant had no idea what they were getting into. Like no one knew why they were there.
So I mean, nobody would have even known, because they didn't even know they were going to a wedding.
Someday, when immersive theater is huge, there will be so much comedy around things like this gone completely sideways. People still thought they were in the experience, and yeah, that's great.
Anyway, so.
But this is immersive theater in Los Angeles is getting huge. San Francisco, New York. I mean, it's really starting to peek out into the world, and
peak.
Peak. Yeah, looking out over the still to this day, I think when you are at an immersive theater production, you're there because you kind of signed up for it.
Yep.
You know what you were getting into, and we want that to blend a little bit more seamlessly into real life. So anytime you're visiting Two Bit Circus, anytime you walk through those doors, there's some theater going on. There's something going on behind the scenes.
That's cool.
And you can sort of pull back the curtain and see a little bit of the drama that's going on, the story that motivates this entire place. And we want that story to change over time, and we want to see how people react. And it's always going to be changing.
So you know Alon Lee, right? Exploding Kids. He was one of the first interviews that we ever did a long time ago, and he talked about...
the two of you show up to our story rooms and destroy them. Yeah.
We was chatting about the very earliest immersive theater, immersive gaming, and how people didn't know that they were a part of it, and that was a problem because they didn't know, or maybe they signed up for it, but they didn't realize that they were going to get phone calls at 2 a.m. saying that there's an alien invasion in this. So I guess that's the point, is that he was saying is that you have to make it clear that you're signing up and where the boundaries are.
Have people come to expect phone calls at 2 a.m. now, informing them of an alien invasion?
I don't know, but I turn off my phone.
I'm calling you.
I turn off my phone at night. You're listening to The Art of Manufacturing. Follow our adventures on Instagram and Twitter at @ArtofMFG. And to chat with other like-minded creators, join the Art of Manufacturing Facebook group. We'll be right back after this break. The Art of Manufacturing podcast is a collaboration with Make It in LA, which is generously supported by organizations like the LA Cleantech Incubator. LACI has a really cool facility in the Arts District of downtown LA filled with energetic startups and nonprofits. They offer cleantech startups flexible office space, epic prototyping labs, and the #1 rated cleantech incubation program in the world. Learn more at makeitinla.org/LACI. We're speaking with Brent Bushnell and Eric Gradman, the founders of Two Bit Circus. I'd like to get your thoughts on what this means for other companies. Let's say if the listeners who may be running, whether it's a Fortune 500 company doing, product development, or maybe they're entrepreneurs, they're not in the business of immersive gaming and circus, but how could they bring some of this co-creation into their product development?
I'd be surprised if any company wasn't in the business of innovation on some level, right? Having to innovate in their business, having to push their business forward in some way. And, for me, the iterate and test, the getting things to some usable version as fast as possible is invaluable. And, one of my favorite quotes, Madeleine Engel, she says, "Inspiration comes during work, not before it." And that is so powerful because we can sit in a boardroom and imagine the ways things could go all day long. But it's not until you actually engage and start to see what's happening and, is this thing fun? Is this thing, is my expectation bearing out in reality? You got, all of us entrepreneurs, inventors, you are hypothesizing, right? We're all basically researchers trying to validate our hypothesis. And the faster that you can validate aspects of your hypothesis, the sooner you can iterate and feed that back into your design.
Yeah, I think inventing and prototyping can sometimes be a very individual pursuit. And for companies to identify those people who love doing that and give them a little bit of rope to do it. But also, as a prototyper, I need to test my stuff on people. I need to test my stuff on people. I need people. Like invention and prototypes, they run on tests and on other people. And I feel very fortunate that we have a company with staff. And I am constantly subjecting them to new crazy things and seeing how they react. And they become part of the co-creation of that thing. But not just because they're staff, but because they're participants. And any participant you bring in to play with a prototype has there is not a person who walks through our door who we don't invite to feedback on what we're building and what they expected and what they'd like to see. And obviously not all of that makes it into the product, but all of it makes it into that soup. It really helps us build better stuff.
Diversity gets a lot of airplay these days. And what we're talking about is a diverse process. Eric was talking about the invention process for a given product being one person, right? You want really lots of voices involved in creation of that product. And if they can't be the ones actually implementing it, they can be the ones giving you feedback on it. And so when we have a beta night and little Johnny comes and his grandma comes, all of a sudden we have lots of different characteristics that we can test against to see, is this thing any fun? Is this thing is the contrast right for grandma and her eyes? Is the size right for little Johnny? You can start to really get to the bottom of what's going on.
What prepared you guys to start a circus? Besides being in the circus, Eric.
Well, I can tell you what prepared us for starting this company. Mm-hmm. And that's the willingness to do a lot of hard work. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, throwing away lots of stuff means you're constantly building new stuff and you're constantly testing new stuff. And I think you and I both have in common the fact that Oh, man. We're workaholics. We are absolute workaholics.
And in the beginning, we did not have a profit motive. And I think that's also important, right? We were experimenting. And at first, it was fun stuff that we could take to parties to show off with our friends. And, that was an important piece too. We, out of the passion of doing something that we were just doing for fun, a business was born. But it was, the number of times entrepreneurs talk about how much money they're going to make and what all of that stuff looks like. And before they really have any proof of traction and a working solution, you really want that stuff first. And then you can figure out, how this is going to make $1 billion.
Brent and I started our first company together 10 years ago when there was a recession on. And I quit a perfectly good job to go do this because I loved it. That it was definitely not out of an expectation that this was going to become a big thing.
So can we share?
I was at a company called Applied Minds.
Which is like nerd heaven.
It was nerd heaven.
Amazing place.
It's to this day an incredible, incredible place. But my desire to sort of build whatever I want, led me to work with Brent because we really we've had the opportunity now for many years to just play.
What was that decision like? Was it hard?
That decision was incredibly hard for me to make. As y'all have said, it is nerd heaven there. The most incredible machine tools, giant projects that are well-funded, and it's taken many years to realize an environment that I feel matches that, and I'm so proud because to this day, that's the best job I've ever had while I was still working in a job. And to have recreated that environment for people and to discover that people now speak the same way about Two Bit Circus, that it's a wonderful place to go for nerds to prototype and build cool stuff, like that just absolutely warms my heart.
God, and I still feel like that is aspirational. Like I want to make it even more.
Oh, I know. Of course.
Yeah.
What was that like though, leaving? Because it must have taken a while. I think a lot of times in the same way that when you get to the end of a book, you get so engaged in a book and then you start another one and that it's a little bit of a letdown in a way. And you're like, oh my God, this is way harder than I thought. And a lot of entrepreneurs go through that. They have to make that decision of leaving a really good job.
Yeah, of course it was very difficult. And we were in the middle of a recession and, I told myself I was going to do some consulting and that would pay the bills. That didn't last very long. We started the company within 6 weeks, I think.
And I would say, though, that we had some proof of revenue generation, right? The moment that you were quitting, there was money that had been coming in from some side projects. We'd done a couple of those parties. We'd started to get some contract gigs. And
I paid my rent.
Yeah. But that's a meaningful moment, and I think that the old world idea of a career that you are there for 30 years and then you retire at 50, oh my God, is that over? And not only is that over, your time is so much, you can thin slice your time so much more powerfully so that, you've got your 40 hours and you've got all those other hours, right? Nights and weekends. And, there's lots of time there. And so for someone engaged in full-time effort, full-time job, the experimenting with the thing that they want to do and allowing that to take some of that nights and weekends time. And then only as it has some demonstrated traction, then that, can you start to make the educated move to jump full time. At that point, you're not doing it completely blind. You have some proof that there's a dog that hunts here.
One last anecdote about leaving that job and going to build something with Brent is the Friday that I decided to quit. It was a very hard day for me. I think I might have cried. Then I got in my car and I drove to Berkeley, where I'd been invited to speak at TEDx Berkeley about what Brent and I were doing together. And so let me tell you, there's no better way to buffer quitting a really good job than going and standing up on stage in front of thousands of people and hearing them get excited about what you're going to do next.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. How long did it take before you felt like, okay, this was a good idea?
Oh, negative 10 days. I was
okay.
Yeah. No,
and how long did it take for you to make that decision?
I think I wanted to make that decision for about 6 months. At the point at which Brent and I were already out trying to raise money for the company we had not started, I was taking days off work to go do pitches for investors. It was probably 4 months of that.
That wasn't that long then. No. That smile on your face.
So felt like a long time back then.
I know, really. How about you, Brent? So you come from an interesting family, and you've done some interesting things in your past.
Yeah, I'm sort of unemployable.
Well, what was it like to grow up in the family of and in the shadow of Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari and Chuck E. Cheese's? Clearly it's in your blood. But what was that like?
Well, it was interesting because he's an entrepreneur and an engineer and really raised us with a foot in both of those camps. And he was, his dad worked in construction, and he was, the only boy, had 3 sisters, at a very young age was supposed to be an adult. His dad died at a very young age, and his mom really looked to him as, as the adult, as another adult in the house with his younger sisters. And so it was an interesting thing for him because he was very self-reliant and really expected that of us as a very young age. And so he was always, twisting our toes to get us out of bed and go weed the garden. And, he continues to this day to value grit over just about anything.
When he had a lot of labor, 8 kids,
there's
right?
8 of us. So, we could marshal an army. We could definitely clean that garden in no time flat, but he was very serious about us, he wasn't going to give us money. He was happy to take us to business meetings, but he expected us to do it on our own. And that was, I'm really thankful for that because he really, he gave us all a really freaking gnarly work ethic. And then in tinkering, as he was tinkering with the internet in the 90s, we were tinkering with the internet in the 90s. And we compromised the old phone system in our house in order to have local Apple Talk networks. And, we really were playing with that stuff really young, HyperCard and all of this fun, all these fun tools. Yep. And so, he was constantly pushing us out to do things. And as a result, we all left the nest being like, well, screw games and entertainment. We're going to go do our own thing, Dad. We don't need you at all.
Right.
All of my siblings, we all worked in different domains for a while. I was in auto salvage and aftermarket insurance, and my brother and I started a web hosting, web design company, and we did all this other stuff. And it was really meeting Eric and starting to collaborate with this, fun interactive art. And then the art turned into games. And all of a sudden I was like, what have I been doing? I love this stuff. Why am I, to turn my back on it? But by then it was like I'd been on my own for a decade and it, was paying my rent with my own businesses and really felt like I, had the right to go back into games.
I am so glad that we didn't go into business auto salvage together. Dude. Probably a smart choice.
Yeah. It's an interesting niche world.
Well, you could have been building all sorts of crazy cars and stuff.
Oh my God. Well, it's wild that, those auto salvage yards. Oh my God. There's so much gear in there. Yeah, it's kind of also,
my uncle used to take me to those all the time. So you went right from the server hosting company to doing this, or?
Well, so it was an interesting transition. So my brother and I were doing that. We had racks of servers in downtown LA and a bunch of clients. And at the time, my dad was getting ready to do a high-tech restaurant. Touchscreens on all the tables, displays on the walls. And I introduced him to the CTO. The CTO was a guy that I was subleasing my server space from. And so I was like, oh, this guy's a good technician. Like maybe he could be your CTO. And so they get the company funded and they're opening up these high-tech restaurants. They're about 6 months out and the CTO turns to me. He's like, hey, would you come and help? He's like, I really need a team. And at the time I had programmers and I had, we'd been working with all this web infrastructure to build all our stuff. And I was like, I don't really want to work with family. I've sort of got this thing going. He's like, listen, help for just 6 months. We'll be offsite, and you can go back and do your thing. And one thing led to another and ended up, helping with that restaurant concept for a couple of years. But it really got me in hospitality and seeing more of that sort of live interactive entertainment, in public, and left me with some early enthusiasm for that space. And then Eric and I started collaborating and I was like, oh, this is a no-brainer. Like this stuff is this is what I was put on this planet to do.
How'd you meet?
Doug Campbell, who started Mindshare, invited 10 nerds to a happy hour at Barbara's Bar inside the brewery. And we all met there on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night. And Eric and I had been talking, I think, over email about Artfall, this interactive whiteboard we wanted to do. And we all were sitting there drinking beer, showing projects we were doing. And then the band all broke up. And Eric and I went that night and just kept coding.
I lived right upstairs. Yeah. We started the project that night. Yeah. And it was like 4 all-nighters after that.
Dude, it was so, we literally stayed, I remember leaving running the brewery at 4 a.m, and then like realizing I had to work the next day. It was like, wow, this is really devouring my life.
Yeah, it was not long before you decided to move into the brewery too. So we could just keep building stuff.
And it was 2008. So for the first time in history, there wasn't a freaking delay. There wasn't a wait list, and I actually had a selection of sites and was like, oh yeah, this place. And
Describe the brewery. It is a unique place. Not everyone's heard of it.
The brewery is an entire city block in the middle of downtown Los Angeles. It's called the Brewery because it used to be an old Pabst brewery. Now it is one of the biggest artist communities in the world. 300 different workshops. It's been there since the 70s. There's a beautiful old building that's the old Edison electric power plant, and it's a wonderful place. There's a lot of people live there. A lot of people have studios there. There's an art walk twice a year. Anybody who's got space there opens up their doors, and the public floods in. For us, it's always wonderful. Everybody else is showing pottery and photography, and we're basically setting up a big arcade. And then but it's also for Los Angeles real community. There's a holiday party every year. Barbara's Bar, which is right there on campus. You see a lot of the same folks. You just run into the same people. It really it's wonderful.
I want to go back to the Steam Carnival.
Yeah.
I remember going to the gala. That was really cool. You had a bunch of Steam Carnivals already set up ahead, right? But how did that work out? I think you remember telling me that it didn't work out exactly as what you expected.
Yeah, really great question. So we launched the carnival on Kickstarter, which was insane and awesome. It was a terrible process, but it was also, allowed this to happen, right? Because most people who sell things on Kickstarter are selling a watch, and you can be anywhere in the world and you can buy that watch. We were like, hey, we want to throw out a carnival. We don't know when or where. Want to buy a ticket? What a crazy offer, and so we had committed to doing LA and San Francisco in that event, in that Kickstarter. And as a result of getting all the media attention we did, right? We were in Time Magazine, USA Today, Discovery Channel. It was crazy the amount of attention that Kickstarter got. It was sort of right at the right time for STEM and STEAM. We'd promised those two events. And so we did LA and people loved it. 5,000 people a day. Crazy. Okay, great. A year later, we go and we do San Francisco, and we're ramping up to San Francisco, and we're planning a whole national tour. We're going to do 4 more cities, Seattle and Charlotte and Dallas. So we're super excited, but we're hustling hard to get this thing open. We're hustling hard to get all the sponsorship raised. And going into San Francisco, we're thinking, we're going to do this national tour and it's going to be great. And coming out of San Francisco, after having spent a year to raise all the sponsorship money, right? 10 days to set the whole thing up, the entire year to build all the infrastructure. And then we run it for the weekend, right? It's open for 3 days, 120,000 square feet. And Sunday night, and we're like, cleaning it all up, right? We just got here. I look at Eric. I'm like, are you serious? We're leaving now? We just literally set everything up. And we leave San Francisco and we're like, God, it was such a weird situation. Just kind of on the one side, to be completely sold out and have people just clawing themselves, loving it, having a ball, kids, photos, everything. Wow, all this 250 million media impressions. Amazing. And on the other side, we're like, oh my God, like we want to die. That was so much work. It was profitable, but not enough for the amount of work. There's some disconnect here. And so I was just going to say that we came back and had a real soul search of like, we're about to, are we really ready to do this 4 more times? And is this the right format? We'd had a couple of really solid tests and it was not the right format. And so that was what spawned a whole deep exploration of what the alternatives were. And out of that came our micro-amusement park and a whole dedicated foundation that's kicking ass now. So I'm really psyched with where we landed.
Yeah, building a traveling event that has to go up quickly and tear down quickly and move easily brings with it a lot of constraints, a lot of technical constraints. And we had to make a lot of compromises in the things that we were building in order to make it possible for stuff to fit on a truck, for example, or to break down and set up quickly. And I found myself personally spending a lot more time figuring out how to get stuff to fit on a pallet than I was building crazy tech, building fun stuff. We were compromising on everything just so we could get it in there quickly.
What was that process like? Because I think just the way psychology works, the more you invest in something, the more you justify to yourself why you did it, and can be really hard to walk back from committing to that. I mean, that's true for political beliefs and it's true for business decisions, throwing good money after bad. How did you even start the conversation in your mind?
Brent, you said you cried the day we announced that we were ending the carnival, and so did I. Like, it was a really tough decision, incredibly tough. But I was so delighted to get rid of some of the bad decisions I'd made, frankly. Like, so many last-minute hacks and just terrible things were bound up in some of the projects that we'd done and were bringing to the carnival. And it was
one of the hacks.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I mean, have I mentioned that prototypes give people splinters? I mean, sometimes we were in such a rush that we weren't even solving problems like that. Like, things were frankly a little bit dangerous. You know, some of these things were just done in such a rush just to fill up space, just to get something that could fit in this particular space that we knew we had in a venue that we were going into. And once we got past okay, we have to make a new decision, to be able to sort of like get rid of all that sunk cost was very freeing, you know? Not to mention freeing up lots of space in the warehouse that I needed to build all sorts of new stuff.
So it sounds like you were kind of prepped for it. It was just hard to...
Even coming out of the LA event, as a company, we lost the entire month of November. I mean, we were so exhausted. People talk about 2 hours a night of sleep, whatever. It was actually that for a week, of total sleep deprivation, total exhaustion. The entire company did nothing for November. And that's not sustainable, right? We actually burned out some employees that we love, and they were like, we just can't do this anymore. It's not healthy. That's not fun. That's not a good way to run. And
it's worth mentioning, though, that the way the foundation approaches the Steam Carnival is so much more sustainable than the way we did. I mean, please don't take what we're saying to suggest that, the Steam Carnival is still running, but it's run in a completely different and smarter way now. One that takes advantage of the desire among the communities that it's going into to be a part of it. Like,
there's
where
a whole
it goes,
playbook. They throw it themselves, right? This is literally
like
a
TEDx.
complete alternative to the science fair. It's like a TEDx. Exactly. We have an entire playbook where they can throw their own event. Kids learn STEM and STEAM, building their own games.
That's even better. They're building them.
They build their own stuff, and then they actually learn college and career readiness throwing their own event. It's really a powerful format.
I have to say that was one of the things I felt was missing in the first Steam Carnival, was that I felt like it was inspirational, but it wasn't maybe as educational as it could be. Yeah. And so if you're getting the kids to be building it themselves, the co-creation piece, then they're going to be learning.
But we needed that experience to be able to build that playbook.
Of course,
And having done so, now it can sustain itself. Now it can live on.
Right. If we had just landed at the foundation approach without having done it, it would be a completely different event. Yeah.
That is a really interesting point, And I think that knowing that you could end up somewhere else even better would have made it easier maybe for you to let go. I know that my very first startup, our first invention, it turns out there was already a patent out there. And we're like, well, I guess we're not going to do this company. And then not me, but one of my two other business partners, after about a week or so of just being disappointed, he came back and said, you know what, I think I have a different idea, a different twist on it that is even better, and it gets around the patent. And so it was almost the fact that we had that other patent out there that made us rethink it and made it even better.
Amazing.
I think Brent and I are both very excited about the idea of intermediate impossibles. Was that John Cleese?
That was John Cleese.
It was John Cleese.
Yeah. His on creativity talk, which is awesome.
Yeah. The idea that you may come up with an idea that's completely untenable and frankly terrible. But if you get it out there in a way that other people hear it and it spurs them to come up with new ways of thinking, I mean, that's the purpose of brainstorming, is not to come up with 100 good ideas. It's to come up with 100 bad ideas that lead to one good idea. In some sense, the Steam Carnival was almost that. It was, let's make this happen. Let's bring this into the world as a prototype. And essentially, we had to throw away a lot of what we did with the first Steam Carnival. Yeah. But what it yielded was magic and can now live on.
Tell me about your 16-year-old selves, and what would they think about you now?
Oh, wow. My 16-year-old self would be shocked at what is going on right now. And I don't know that in my mind I could have imagined that this would be my life on any level. I think I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and played around with that really young. I always knew that I loved making and building stuff, but I didn't really know what those were going to look like. And the idea that we would get to build things and travel the world to find new ways to entertain people and educate kids and all that. I mean, it's like bananas.
Where'd you grow up?
In the Bay Area, right in Silicon Valley. So not too far. I was born at Stanford Hospital. And
were you a nerd?
Yeah, definitely a nerd. We played Dungeons and Dragons and
You're a nerd.
all that kind of stuff. I was a total nerd. I was at a private school, but could sort of interact with different the different social groups and stuff, and always sort of had a reasonable amount of friends. But definitely more nerd than jock.
And how about you?
16-year-old Eric was rather a conservative fellow and had not yet gone to college and engaged in all the irresponsible behaviors that brings with it. I did not have a mohawk. I had not toured with a circus around the country. I had not realized that I could build stuff yet, really. 16-year-old Eric would be absolutely... He wouldn't even recognize this guy. Eric's 16-year-old friends also would not recognize Eric if they met him today, which is why I'm not going to high school reunions.
The last question, what's the one piece of advice you wish you had known and that you'd want to share with the entrepreneurs and listeners?
Start today. Do something right
yesterday.
Now. Yeah, start. Don't overanalyze it. Pick anything. And in fact, it doesn't actually matter what you pick, because the act of getting out there and exploring and trying and doing, just make the decision in your life to expose yourself to as many different things as possible. Go to random conferences, read books that have nothing to do with your life or even your interests, right? Try to just explore, and in that exploration, you'll start to find things that are awesome and that do resonate with you. And the more that you expose yourself to different things, the more you'll know when it resonates with you. You'll be like, wow, this packaging convention is really boring. Oh, this other thing over here is super interesting, and you'll start to really figure out what's awesome.
I have very little to add to that. I feel like that's exactly my philosophy. I will say this. Someone told me once that you have to work smarter, not harder. That's totally wrong. You have to first work smarter and then work twice as hard after you figure that first part out. And if you can get both of those things, then good things will happen.
So how can people learn more about Two Bit Circus?
twobitcircus.com. And we're going to be opening in the summer, and we hope you will be inundated with messaging about this opening part. We want you to come. We want you to show up. We have beta nights, and we will be doing sort of soft opening sorts of things. And we would love people in the tech community to come on our website and see the kinds of events that we have planned, not necessarily all open to the public, but get in contact with us. Because we're going to be opening spaces for people early to get in, see the stuff, and possibly be a part of the fun.
Awesome. So great to see you guys.
Oh, Z,
great
it's so awesome. Thank you for
Thanks
this.
For having
this
us.
is really killer.
Well, that would be a fun company to work for, don't you think? I have such a soft spot for immersive games and experiences. And I'm excited about this big shift from passive consumption to interactivity and getting your hands dirty. And by the way, you can hear more about immersive experiences in our recent episode with Ashley Crowder at Ventana. I enjoyed hearing Brent and Eric's unique process of innovation. It might be cliche to say you have to iterate to innovate, but it's not so easy to do in practice. And there seems to be 4 key elements that many people miss. First, prototype. Fast. It's so impressive how they can get a new idea up and running within a day. Second, get it in the hands of your customers as quickly and as often as you can to get feedback. Two Bit Circus hosts beta nights to test their ideas, but what we didn't talk about as much was the additional value of building loyalty with our closest fans that are participating in that process. And of course, diversity in points of view is important, as we learned. And then third, collect and analyze the data. Qualitative and quantitative analysis are both important, but don't just use your gut. Use tools. I'm including some links that Eric mentioned in the show notes. And then finally, the most important part is to kill ideas. A lot of them. Some of you might recall episode 3 of The Art of Manufacturing way back when with the founder of Exploding Kittens, Alon Lee. He had these crazy stories, and he talked about relentlessly killing good ideas to free up space for better ones. But to be honest, it's easier said than done when you put your heart and soul into something, like, say, their Steam Carnival, or anything that you're doing in your startup. Brent literally said that he cried. But by taking a step back and allowing themselves to be honest about the situation, they could actually find an even better solution. Time to wrap it up for The Art of Manufacturing. Tune in next Thursday when we speak with Dr. Anita Sengupta, Senior Vice President of Systems Engineering for Virgin Hyperloop One, recorded live at Art Center College of Design. It's a great conversation, and we'll see you then. For show notes, visit www.artofmfg.com. Follow our adventures on Instagram and Twitter at artofmfg. And to chat with other like-minded creators, join the Art of Manufacturing Facebook group. Never miss an episode. Subscribe on iTunes or Spotify or your favorite player. And if you like the show, do us a favor and leave us a review. Or send us a message with your thoughts and ideas to feedback@artofmfg.com. This podcast is produced by At Large and Dangerous in collaboration with Make It in LA and other partners. Visit makeitinla.org/connect to sign up for local LA events and news. A big shout out to Peter Brandenburg, the producer and audio engineer. Thanks for listening to The Art of Manufacturing. I'm Z Holly, and remember, don't just make it, make it.
So rad.